My guest on the show this week is Bob Wheatley. Bob Wheatley is a former professional athlete. We're going to find out more about what sport specifically, and he is a published author. Bob, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on the show.
What's going on is we're about to have a fun conversation. For the audience, I know Bob. I've been in rooms with Bob. We've spoken a bit, and we do work at a company together, but we haven't actually spent much time. So Bob and I were just catching up on how we're actually going to get to know each other a lot more, and we're going to record it for all of you. So it'll be a fun conversation. Bob's somebody I admire. Sales, ride or die. You know, I talk about this in the show. I'm a former salesperson, but not really former. I love selling, and we'll probably talk a little bit about what you're up to now with selling, but you're also a published author, and we're going to talk about that. So Bob, we got a lot to get to know each other and to talk about. So let's get right into the questions for today. So Bob, very first thing is, what's something you nerd out about?
Something I nerd out about. I recently just bought my first home. So I've been doing a lot of deep dive into all things real estate, investing, looking at the second property. Yeah. That's very nerd land. But I also have a background in finance. So I'm always I nerd out about that stuff, like making sure my life insurance is dialed in. And it's the former financial advisor in me that I can't really shake. But yeah, the flavor of the day is real estate.
Yeah, real estate is, all right. So as we're literally getting to know each other and we're recording it, I'm a real estate person too. We own a couple properties. Mm-hmm. We are Airbnb people. I love real estate. Real estate it's fun. And it's also, as you've probably come to find out, it's never ending. There's so much out there about it. And congratulations on the home.
So
have you gotten deep into
I was just going to say, what would you say to me as somebody who just bought their first property? I have two renters that are with me, so they're helping with the mortgage. What would you say to somebody who's now considering that second property, really the first true investment property where I'm not living? What do I need to know?
Yeah. So you're not living there. You're not vacationing there. It's solely for the purposes of being a landlord.
I'm living in the home I just bought. If I were to buy another 2024, 2025, like I'm starting to save up and plan for it. Yeah. What do I need to know for property number two?
Yeah. And the property number two is not for you to go and vacation at. It's just a place to like own real estate.
Passive income.
We have a property like that. I'm sure you've heard this. This is going to be 101. Get a good tenant for less money is worth way more than a little more rent and a bad tenant every single time. Yeah. Every single time. And I'm not going to define what a good tenant and a bad tenant is because it's subjective, but we have somebody in our apartment in Brooklyn that we own that doesn't pay us what market rate is, but he's like the best tenant ever. And we're 2 hours from there. So that saves me so much headache over, suppose like, hey, Bob, the toilet doesn't work. I need you over here tonight. You're like, well, I'm 30 minutes away if it's in Nashville. If you can get both, amazing. Also think there's something to be said for, again, and I think this is a sales thing too. Like in sales, you'd rather have good clients, in my opinion, wonderful clients who are going to sell you and be your testimonial and be a great client and show up and do the work for a little less money than that person who pays you top dollar that just becomes a pain in your butt.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that would be my piece of advice for you.
The two guys that I'm living with now, like my current tenants in my primary place of residence, like I know they're awesome. I'm already friends with them, kind of same deal, kind of getting like a sweetheart deal.
Yeah.
But you're going to run out of friends. Like you can't have friends in each and every one of your properties. So I hear you on that. Just offer something low, but it's kind of your good tenant tax. Like that's worth a couple $100 a month. That makes sense.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Even better if they also are skilled at doing something that helps keep a property up that they like to do. They're like, hey, you know what? I really love to do landscaping. Would you mind if I went and out did that? I'm like, that's worth something too.
I hear you.
That's awesome, Bob. Let's talk about your comfort zone. So let's start with something, Bob, that's inside of your comfort zone. And you know that this is something that's going to be outside of somebody else's. And I'm going to take at least one thing off the table because it's just too easy. I'm going to take two things off the table. I'm going to take one thing off the table. I'm changing my mind in real time. Sales. You and I both know that sales is something that a lot of people will not do. It's out of their comfort zone. The idea, they'll have all the value in the world, but the minute they go, oh, and by the way, you need to hand me some money for that, they'll go, oh, my comfort zone. Take sales off the table. What's something else that is inside of your comfort zone that you know is outside of somebody else's?
It's funny that you say that about sales. I didn't even consider that. That wasn't on like my top 3 to choose from. I guess I'm just so close to that world that I kind of forget. I guess I do sell, and it is difficult for some people to ask for the business. So that wasn't even on my radar. The first thing I thought of was, as far as what's in my comfort zone, I love musicals, like Broadway shows.
Me too.
And I don't think that's the case for everybody. I just grew up around that. Like, I'd rather go to a Broadway show than a concert or something. If we're like bumping music in my ear, like a club or something is my worst nightmare. I want no part of that. But if I go to a Broadway show or something, there's a storyline and there's beautiful music and I can hear myself think at the end of the night, I will absolutely love that. So within my comfort zone, maybe not within others. It just won't be like, oh man, Friday night, got to go to TPAC, the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. It's like, that's not what everybody's jumping at. But for some reason, that's always been where I lean. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. But I love Broadway musicals as well. And I lived in New York City for 15 years. So I got a chance to go to the actual Broadway and got to a lot of musicals. Let's talk about this for a minute, since it's both something we enjoy. What are a couple of your favorite shows you've ever seen? Or like, do you have any go-tos? Like, what's your jam?
So I love The Lion King is awesome. I've seen Phantom as well.
Amazing.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was great. I've always really liked that music.
I've heard.
But I would say far and away Les Mis.
Les Mis
is my favorite. We won't get to... And I talk about it in my book. I quote it a number of times, because in my book, I basically have told the Bible through stories, and it's mostly movies.
Yeah.
A bunch of movies, some novels, and one Broadway show. That one Broadway show is Les Mis.
Les Mis.
And I read the original novel by Victor Hugo. It took me like 8 months to do it because it was 1,247 pages. But man, I love that story. I always have. And the music is obviously awesome. It stood the test of time. Yeah. So I'd say Les Mis, number 1.
There you go. Les Mis. It's amazing. I've seen Les Mis on Broadway once. Obviously, I've seen the Tom Hooper movie a couple times. Anne Hathaway, Oscar winner for that film, I believe. Very cool. Les Mis. I love it. So, Bob, what about on the other side? Something that's uncomfortable for you, and you know other people love it, and let's take live music off the table, or go to the club off the table, because we know a lot of people that is their jam.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's where I was going to go. I'm talking to humans all day, every day. I work in sales. It's very client facing. I'm on a podcast here with you. So I do a lot of stuff day to day where I'm interacting with people. I'll go to networking events, the whole deal. I am very much an introvert. I recharge in silence. I recharge in simplicity. If you have a long week, long day, like my antidote is, all right, let's turn down the lights. Let's turn up the air conditioner and throw on a movie. Like I want no part of loud music, the club, dancing, whereas some other people are like, oh man, what a long week. I got to get out. I got to go do this. I got to like get some energy out. I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no energy left. I've been on sales calls 8 hours in a row today. Like, I just want to chill. So as far as my comfort zone, I know we're taking dancing clubs and stuff off the table, but that was honestly the first place.
That's good.
First place that I went. I can handle myself in those situations. You got a couple go-to dance moves that you just pull out of a hat, but I am never thriving in those moments. That is, it's an uphill battle for me. It's like I have to be on. I'm performing. I'm not faking, but I'm performing. Whereas, like, if I'm watching Les Mis, I'm like, this is heaven. This is awesome.
Man, I love how life works. We're recording this. We're actually going to release this tonight, March 22nd, because I had another episode that I'm going to hold a little bit for another author, and your book is out. So let's get you out. And it's funny you bring this up, Bob, because I spoke last night in a Toastmasters competition, and the name of my speech was Introversion, Extroversion, and Everything Everywhere in Between. And I talk about the misunderstandings, and then I talk about who I am and who the introvert is at a party. I'm actually 100% extroverted. Okay. And I'm the person, and I literally used you and I as an example without me knowing it was you at the time. I said, you got the person at the party or the person who's done the work for the week, and they're like, hey, where are we going next? What are we doing next? What concert are we going to? What Broadway show? I said, then you got the person who's over there. They love the one-on-one conversation. And they're the person's like, you know what? I think it's time to leave, but I'm not going to tell anybody so I can get out of here.
100%.
And I'm the person where my wife will be like, hey, we got to go. And I'll be like, great. And then an hour later, she's like, we literally have to go, and pull her out. Yeah. But, I'm really glad you brought this up, because one of the things that's misunderstood about introversion and extroversion that I'm sure you know is and I talked about this in my speech, is it's not that you're shy or you're not social. It's not that an extrovert is a better salesperson. It's where you generate your energy from. And that's really all Carl Jung meant when he created it. And it's turned into quite frankly, a lot of stereotypes that just aren't true.
Yeah. You're shy, you're outgoing. Yeah. It's like, no, that's not it. So
it's not what it recharges me. What it actually means is, but Bob, what you just said is fascinating. That I do think it means is for somebody who's quite introverted, when you're with people all day, you do have to have a level of performance,
right?
Like an athlete would have a performance, or an actor would have a performance. For me to hang out at the bar till 3 a.m, there's no performance there. Like, I'm actually just pumped to be there.
Yeah, 100%. It's like an uphill versus downhill climb. Like, if I'm at the bar at 2 a.m., that is like Mount Everest uphill battle. It's like, what are we doing here? Whereas for you, that's like, you're loving it. That's kind of a downhill thing. Like, hey, I'm just going with gravity. Like, this is awesome. Let's go to 3 a.m. Right? Like, we're just so opposite.
We're like South Broadway. Where are we going next? Where's the So we're in South Broadway. Where are we going 100%. Next? What do you, as somebody who also works with salespeople, manage, and you have a sales team? How do you effectively manage the really extroverted people on a sales team as a more introverted sales manager, sales VP of sales, sales director, whatever you'd call yourself?
I would say that when it comes to managing anybody, is first of all, just connecting with that person, like understanding them, understanding their likes, their dislikes, what they need. But again, I go back to the performing thing. Performing isn't faking. So just because I'm a naturally introverted person does not mean that introvert doesn't have all the tools he or she needs to be a good leader. And so I think about, and I've really, I was a sales manager at my previous company, sales director at Brand Builders Group. It's a similar hat in that I'm kind of a player coach, in that I still will take sales calls, client facing stuff outside of the BBG community, but then also helping the team. I'm kind of like the point guard, making sure that everybody has their respective ball and is able to score. And so it's just, number one, I think when I'm at my best, there's a sense of servant leadership. It's like, okay, I could bat 1,000 and close everybody, but we have a team here. Like, there's more than one person here. What if they were all awesome? So what if I sacrifice a little bit of myself in order for them to be better? If I'm Chris Paul, am I okay with scoring 12 points, but having 14 assists? Am I okay with that? Some athletes aren't, and so when it comes to a leadership position, be a point guard in basketball, quarterback in football, whatever it is, it's a team above yourself. So how do I deal with the extroverts? Number one, I appreciate who they are. It's like, how in the world do you still have energy right now? How are you at the bar on Broadway at 2 a.m.? You are nuts. Like, you are an alien. That's awesome. Like, we should take you to a lab and study you. I don't have that DNA. That's awesome. Yeah. But it's also like, when somebody is extroverted, usually that means their mind is also moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So for them, it's less of gasoline. It's more like, let's put up bumpers. Let's keep you moving downfield. Let's give them the tools in order to be most effective. Energy is not a problem. Yeah. It's usually tactics, precision, stuff like that, which are things that I'm naturally good at. So it's just in taking their strengths, highlighting them, understanding their weaknesses, and giving them tools in those areas.
Yeah. I love that idea. Somebody who's very extroverted, and I spent 20 years in sales, focus can be a real problem, because you want to meet everybody and you want to talk to people about the solutions you have. And
Or
not getting into like the tactics of sales, but just like meeting the people, and like every opportunity is a potential opportunity. Like, but are they?
Right. That's what I was just going to say. Or you oversell.
Yeah.
Like we want to bring on the right clients. And I mean, we don't have anybody at Brand Builders that has that commission breath. Like that's not something that we're dealing with, but the extrovert would be more likely to sell on emotion and hype, and the person like, oh yeah, totally, here's my credit card. Whereas the person who is introverted might be a little more meticulous, might be more likely to share the cons about the program. Like, hey, have you considered this as well? Like, this is good. It's also bad. Now that you have all the information, what is your decision? So it's just that would be like taking the extrovert and kind of harnessing that energy so that you have a good customer experience long term, right? If you have have 50% sales, 50% closing percentage, that you would think that's awesome, but it's not awesome if 50% of those people cancel or are frustrated or whatever. Like, it's
horrible. You lose money on those people. It's
both. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to do a whole separate episode with Bob and I to talk about introversion and extroversion in sales. Now I'm like, oh man, this is like a juicy conversation. But we're here to learn about you, learn about the book, and have you put me on the hot seat for a couple things too, Bob. It. So now, giving you 5 minutes, not here in the podcast, you can have 5 minutes or more if you'd like. But if you are 5 minutes and you're able to give your keynote speech to the world, which I love asking this of authors because most authors have kind of done this in their book in some way, shape, or form. What is it that you'd want to talk to all of us about, and what would be your call to action at the end of your speech?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a speech; it would be a sermon. I'm a Christian. My faith is something that's really important to me, and something that frustrates me is the lack of importance that faith has in other people's lives. And so my 5-minute speech, 5-minute sermon would be basically a general call to action in a very Stephen Covey type of way. One of his 7 habits, begin with the end in mind. I think we take that and we love it. Like, we put it on posters and we apply it to our businesses, begin with the end in mind. And we do that. We set up a business plan. We have all the tactics, but it's like a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. What I would say is, no, you're forgetting about the actual end, your end. Like, if death is undefeated, what are you going to do when you die? Begin with the end in mind. So I like I said, I'm a Christian. I wrote this book where it's the Bible through stories, movies, novels, Broadway shows, the whole deal. It's something I believe to be true. I've read the Bible cover to cover the last 5 years. 2023 will be my 6th year. Doesn't make me an expert on all things scripture, but it does mean I'm constantly reminding myself of what is written in that book. The more I read it, the more I believe it to be true. Like, logically, I can logic my way to a master creator of the universe who wants to know us. So I think sometimes you can, like, let's say you're not a Christian, or you're not really, you're not in tune with faith. It's just not a part of your life. Sometimes you might look at the respective faiths as like silos, or like they're all means to the same end of just kind of being a better person, basically. Like, air quote, religious people, they love people better and stuff, but like, you'll eventually die, and like, we'll all just go to nowhere land. If that's really what you believe, great. But more often than not, I think that's an unexplored line of thinking. I think usually people are so worried about tax season. They're worried about their marriage. They're worried about getting their kids to school on time. And they do not begin with the end in mind. They don't think about their end at all. So my 5-minute sermon would be, all right, knowing that death is undefeated, there's not anybody listening to this podcast who has met someone who has not died, has made it 200, 300, 500 years without death. So that's guaranteed. What will happen when your day shows up? And I think for a lot of people, let's say I had, the world listening, there would be millions of people who hadn't considered that. And so as a Christian, like what it says in the Bible, it says to work out your faith with fear and trembling. It says to test everything. Like, the Bible, if somebody hasn't read it, might think, oh, this is kind of like hocus pocus fairy dust. You're just believing, believing myths and stuff. It's like, no, this is a very logical book of history, or so it claims. You need to make a decision on what you believe, on the Bible, on Jesus Christ, on what happens when you die. So that would be, I probably took 5 minutes saying that, but that would be my speech. It's like, we say begin with the end in mind, and we apply that to a business plan. That's dumb. That's incomplete. You need to begin your life with the end in mind.
Oh, that's powerful. I grew up in a Christian home as well. I've talked about this in the podcast. I grew up Lutheran, and we would go every week, and my parents are, go Lutherans, right?
That's right.
I always say it's like the nice Protestant. We're like, we're not going to shame you too much, but we're going to give you some stuff to think about. That's the way I described how my Lutheran upbringing was. But yeah, like I grew up with this message, still believe a lot in a lot of these things. And man, you're making me, Bob, you're making me think, because I am, I run my own business, and I am not so good at longer term thinking. And I'm just saying this out loud as a conversation piece, is we have young children, and the idea of like, how do we survive this day and get him to school the next day, or the 2-year-old, like, how do we make sure that he's okay? It's like, it's so easy to go there. What's the next thing my wife needs to do for her job? What's the next thing I need to do for what I'm doing? What's the next person? I'm not generally thinking that far ahead about eternity, let alone, I mean, kind of a 5-year plan, but man, yeah, it's, I would say, I'd say as humans, we're not really built to do that generally. Like, our brains don't go there because we're in survival
100%. Mode. And like, I grew up in Southern California. So I grew up Los Angeles Lakers fan. Kobe Bryant was, always my best player.
Formerly the Minneapolis Lakers. Just anybody doesn't know why they're called the Lakers.
Totally.
I'm from Minnesota. That's why I say that.
Yeah. Well, it's probably why you're a Lutheran. So, you have Kobe, who, 5-time NBA champion. I think he's maybe a 1-time league MVP, but several-time NBA Finals MVP, like top 10 players of all time. He is awesome. And then tragedy strikes, and he's not here anymore. And so, and he was, probably died at 38, 40, something like that. I can't remember the exact age.
I think it's 39 or 40.
Far too young. Or even his daughter, or the dozen of other, passengers that were on that helicopter. Like, you just don't know. And so we can so easily get stuck in that rat race of, am I going to get the promotion? Am I going to get the girl? Am I going to get my kids to school on time? And never begin with the end in mind. Like I said, we don't consider the most important thing, because when you die, hopefully everybody listening to this dies at 100 years old in their sleep, nice and peaceful. But when that happens, what happens? Like, it's not going to matter. Like, there are no more 401ks. Your kids aren't coming with you in that moment. Like, it's just going to be you. And if what I believe is true, you're going to have a conversation with Jesus. Did you love me?
Yeah.
Did you love me during your time on earth? Now that you see me face to face and I'm real, it's too late. You can either enter and be with us, or depart from me, I never knew you. That's scary. That's when things become real. So
that is scary.
That's why I would say that would be my 5-minute speech, because, and again, like I said, I'm nerding out on real estate these days. Like, I can't wait. I'm going to go to the gym after this, make some dinner, and then I'm going to read my real estate investing book. Like, I can't wait to do that. It's okay to, enjoy and learn and have other interests, but I think it's a huge, huge mistake if somebody doesn't consider their end.
Yeah.
It's like, I probably should take a look at that. Maybe I don't go down to Broadway this weekend. I just sit in my room and think a little bit like, do I think God is real? And does my thinking about his reality or unreality, does that dictate truth? Probably not. Maybe I should just discover what's true. So I'm just a naturally curious person. My mom said that my favorite word when I was a kid was why. So I just want to discover this stuff. And like I said, now after reading the Bible cover to cover so many times, it makes sense to me. Like, it makes more sense that there's a master creator who wants to know us and wants us to know him than this all being an accident. Like it's a greater leap for me to say, yeah, it's just all an accident for no purpose, no real reason behind it. And yeah, like I said, I think I don't want to get too long-winded on that. I just think that's something that's unexplored by people. It's the most important question, and most people don't ask it.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. We're going to take a brief commercial break, and I'm like, maybe for the commercial break, we're just going to like let it sit in silence for a minute, and people could like ponder what Bob just dropped on us. I'm like, that might be about the most, not the heaviest, but it's a very thoughtful and very philosophical, thought-provoking thing is like, do I believe in God? And if I don't, what do I believe in? Or do I believe in nothing? Man, it's good, Bob. All right, we're going to be right back after this. Everybody take a think about what Bob just gave us.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Bob, we're back. So what else is it that you want all of us here to know about you?
Man, what would I want them to know? Do you want to talk about baseball?
Let's talk baseball.
We're talking about that in the break. Yeah, let's talk baseball.
Yeah, let's talk baseball. Tell us about it's like what do you want us to know about your baseball career?
Well, so I played for a couple of years professionally. I'm not saying that to be like, oh, let's talk about my career. There were a lot of cool experiences, a lot of fun things that I learned from it, and I was never like a world-class baseball player. I played Division I college. Now I got drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays in the 26th round. I don't even know how many rounds there are today. I think there might be 40, but like I was number 774 overall. They gave me $1,000, and they're like, "Hey, come to Florida. We'll give you a uniform." It's like, done. Tell me when to show up. So I played for the Blue Jays for a couple of years.
Yeah,
played for the Cardinals for 1 year and a spring training, and then I finished my career in independent professional baseball. And yeah, the things that I took from that, I think have really affected me as far as my personality, my work ethic. I think that the things that I miss the most are probably the people, and you hear that a lot, but I just met some great people. Like half of my teammates weren't even from this country. They were from the Dominican Republic and Venezuela and Colombia and Mexico. And it was a really unique experience. And I actually learned more Spanish playing in the minor leagues than I ever did in school. Don't tell my teachers, but that's how you learn. You learn by using it, when you need to communicate with your shortstop or your catcher. And, they dropped out of school at 12 years old in Venezuela. It's like, you're speaking Spanish, bro. It was a really cool thing.
That's awesome. So we were catching up on this before we pressed record. You were a pitcher. What were you starter, middle, reliever? And I'm curious as we're getting to know you, like what kind of pitcher were you? Were you heater, a lot of control? Like, I'm a baseball guy, so we could talk about
what kind of pitcher was I? A below average one?
Yeah.
I'm tall. I'm left-handed. I would sit like 87 to 90 miles per hour, which is fast for human beings.
Okay.
It's not fast for big league baseball players.
That's slow for big league.
That is.
Yeah.
So in high school, I was a starter. That's almost always going to be the case for somebody who's any good. College, I came out of the bullpen my freshman year and sophomore year. Then I started as a junior and a senior. Again, kind of same deal. Like the cream rises to the top. Usually the older players, they're starters. It just means more innings. It's much more difficult to face Mike Trout 3 times than to face him once in the 9th inning. To get the same guy out 3 times in a row in one day after he's seen all of your pitches is just more impressive. So in pro ball,
which happened to him last night.
Yeah, I know.
I saw he was struck out in the World Baseball Championship by Omonte. Just hilarious.
Schwarber hit the homer in the 8th. I was like, all right, I think we're going to do this. But yeah, that the Team Japan was obviously very, very good. But Yeah. I'd sit 87 to 90. I topped out at 92.
You having some connection issues?
Yeah. I can't see you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I just marked it. We're good. I'll just edit it out. Yeah, just keep on going. Like, well, I don't know what happened because it looked like but I can see you fine.
No kidding. Yeah.
Let me turn on Bob, let me turn on the low data mode. They have a low data mode they added. Cool. Let's see if that helps a little bit. I just marked.
Yeah, you disappeared and now it still says recording continues smoothly. Live video will return when their internet improves.
Oh, it's my internet?
That's why I waited.
I'm going to, yeah, it's weird. I'm going to turn on, let's see, I'm just going to turn on the old low data mode. Okay, sorry, I'm just doing that right now.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
I got you now.
All right. No, it might be me. I'm going to turn on the low data mode. It'll just bump down our.
You're probably wondering, like, why did he stop talking?
No, I figured I saw you doing that.
Well, I can.
All right, we'll
I can see
rolling.
now. Yeah, so I'd sit 87 to 90, topped out at 92. I was a bullpen guy, came out as a reliever for my first couple of years in the minors. Every outing with the Blue Jays, the Cardinals, I started in independent professional baseball. But again, it was just kind of it's the talent pool there when you're not playing for the Yankees, Dodgers, Blue Jays. I was playing for the normal Corn Belters in the Frontier League.
The Corn Belt. There's a team called the Corn Belters. I was
playing for the normal Corn Belters. I was making $600 a month. That's independent professional baseball. So you asked what kind of pitcher I was. Frankly, I made the most of what I had tools wise. I was I'm 6'5", I'm left-handed. That helps as a pitcher, but I was not like a world-class twitchy type of athlete. Like I've never been the strongest.
Yeah.
I certainly have never been the fastest. And I was just making the most of what I had. So I'd sit, threw a lot of fastballs in there at 87, change up behind it. I had a curveball and then I added a cutter when I was playing in the minors just to have like a double play, weak contact type of pitch. But I just got outmatched by hitters that were more talented or pitchers like my teammates that threw faster, and they're the ones that got promoted. So I gave it the most. I gave it the most I had, gave it the best shot. But I was a career single A pitcher. That's just how far my talent took me.
Yeah. Were you a decent hitter?
So actually, I stopped hitting after my freshman year. So I stopped hitting when I was 14. My high school is, we just have an awesome baseball program. I think we've had first round draft picks like 5 of the last 8 years or something. It's been wild. And I know you're in New York.
Wow.
Garrett Cole with the Yankees. He was my high school teammate.
Of course.
Yeah. So
he's done okay for himself. What is he, like 43 million a year or something insane?
He's done okay for himself. Yeah. So my high school was always, so talented, and with people like Garrett, and we've had a bunch of first rounders come out of there even since I've left. It's really become like a factory. I was just kind of a serviceable athlete who I felt like, this is going to be outlandish to say, I'm not going to go that far. I wanted to be like a Peyton Manning on the baseball field, where it's like just being cerebral, and I had to do that type of stuff. Like I was a guy in high school. I had a really bad outing against my rival high school, and then over spring break, when I'm supposed to be at the beach or whatever it is, I would go to their games and scout them. I was that guy. But then the next time I faced him, I threw a complete game shutout because I have all these, I know how to get the 16-year-olds out, because I've seen 8 extra at-bats of theirs. So
you're a thinker.
I just had to be. I could not out talent.
Wasn't talent alone. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really valuable lesson I think is in the business world too, is like the chances of you being the very best in the world at what you do in the business world is slim to none, but the strategy and the tactics you use to outperform or not even perform, just realize that you can perform at the level of a lot of other people. There's actually plenty to go around. That's great. I love that, Bob. Let's go hand the host mic over to you and have you ask me something that I can answer for you and everybody listening. So what do you want to ask me?
Yeah, I would say if you could eat just one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
You're going to give me a second question. This is too easy. It's going to be pizza.
Really?
Pete, I was having this conversation with friends of mine a month ago. My two favorite foods are pizza and nachos.
Okay.
Pizza and nachos, for sure. Like chicken nachos, good pizza. Just so happen to live in New York where there's a lot of good pizza. No, not to offend anybody from Minnesota listening, but Minnesota is not generally known for their pizza. Although there is some good pizza there, but it's not, you don't generally come to the upper Midwest for pizza. So it would be pizza.
Now, are you a deep dish, thin slice?
No. Oh, no. I'm like a Brooklyn style thin slice of Joe's in Greenwich Village or John's Pizza. I don't like deep dish. I mean, I should take it back. I don't dislike deep dish, but if you're saying, hey, Jason, let's go out for some pizza, I would say, Bob, we're going to get a New York slice, not a Chicago slice. It tastes delicious, but I don't need that much crust. I'd rather have like cheese and sauce and toppings.
Yeah, I totally agree. Agree.
That's an easy one. All right, I'm ready. So is that is that the fastball or the changeup? And then I feel like what's coming next is going to be like you're gonna give me some chin music now or something and be like, whoa, that's a big one. Right,
so given that one was so easy, we'll do it again.
You threw that right in. You threw that right into the middle of the strikes. You threw that right in my power.
Yeah. Well, now I feel like I need to stump you on something.
You don't need to stump me, but I'm ready. I'm ready for your knuckler, your hidden knuckler that I didn't know you had before.
Yeah. Well, this would just be like a memory thing. What's the best vacation you've taken?
Yeah.
And why?
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah, this is challenging because I'll just externally process it because is what us as extroverts we like to do, like to externally process this, which is to be annoying. It's hard because now that I have two children, the memories you make with them make it such a great vacation. But when I think about the best vacation, the first thing that comes to mind is 2015. And I'll give you a little bit of the context for it, what made it so great. So I think in April of 2015, I was working at a startup and we were a unicorn, flying high. Things were good. We were privately held, but rumor was an IPO, and we were going to make, my family, my wife and I were going to make a little bit of money, and it was really exciting. And so we booked this trip to 2 weeks, France and Italy.
Wow.
So we did Paris, Florence, Venice, Rome. My wife got pregnant in May, and then in September of that year, the company was sold for $425 million, not for $1 billion, ended up on the front page of the New York Times business section for fraud.
Wow.
And so that trip was originally going to be, hey, we're going to gallivant through France and Italy, which I'd never been to. We're going to eat a lot of fine cured meats and drink a lot of wine. My wife was pregnant, so it's more her problem because I still did all those things. She didn't do any of those. We have a lot of pictures of her in vineyards, none of them with a glass of wine because she didn't. I mean, I think she had like a tiny sip. I guess she would have been like 4 months pregnant at the time. But it was really nice because, one, amazing part of the world if you haven't been there, and I love France, I love Italy. Two, I had decided after the whole thing with that company had happened the week before we left for that trip. And I decided that when we are acquired by this other company, whether or not I get a job offer, I'm leaving, which was very freeing for me. So I went on that trip really just like, don't care, don't need to check email, don't care about this stuff. And also the context of this is actually our baby moon, and we didn't know it was going to be our baby moon. Because my wife, her name is Kirsten. For those who are listening here, she interviewed me. I've interviewed her. Wonderful human. You should listen to both those episodes. My interview with her is much better. She interviews me. It's kind of boring, but interviewing her is great. But so it was our baby moon. And she was at the point where she wasn't pregnant enough where it inhibited anything other than just like being safe. But she could walk around, do all the same things. She just wasn't drinking and eating, things you're not supposed to eat when you're pregnant. So that was definitely the best trip. That was our last trip as Dinks. And now we have 2 kids. So that's what came up.
2 kids, and we'll see you in 20 years. Yeah. Well, that's awesome that you were completely unplugged. I've never been to Europe. I've heard it's amazing. Italy is like
it's
the
amazing.
First thing on my my bucket list.
Italy is a spot for sure. Italy is, and also favorite food is pizza.
There you go.
So it makes
sense. I don't know how
you
went.
I barely did. I was like, this is incredible. The thing I'll say about going to Europe, especially places like Rome, is, California is was a state in 1860 or something. Minnesota, 18, whatever it was, you look at these buildings, you're like, oh my gosh, these buildings are so old. And then you go to Rome, you're like, wait, I'm walking on sidewalks and I'm in crypts and I'm looking at aqueducts that are mentioned in the Bible.
It's wild.
Over 2,000 years old. And you as who likes theology, you're a fan of the Bible. Rome is pretty awesome because you're like, oh yeah, this is where this took place. It's pretty
nerd
cool.
Out in Rome.
The other place that I'll say, and it wasn't a vacation, it was a work trip, but I went early for vacation, I went to Israel. And Israel is just, whether you are religious, whether you're not, Tel Aviv is a phenomenal place. You go to Jerusalem, you see these sites that, whether you believe these things, these are real places. The Garden of Gethsemane is a real place. You're like, these are the olive trees that are there. And this is the spot where, this is where the Sermon on the Mount took place. And that is historically true. And you look at these mosques, Jerusalem has Muslims and Hindu, and it's just an incredible place. And it's just a beautiful place. I went there for work, but I came in 4 days early and got to sightsee and went to the Dead Sea and went to the fortress out in the desert. And you're looking at Palestine. Israel is another place I highly recommend if people haven't been to Israel. It is an awesome country. I know it's not in a good place right now with the political things going on there, but Israel would be my number 2 answer that. But it was also really a nice vacation because I wasn't paying for it.
Amen.
I went for work, which is also really. And by the way, Bob, just to tell you, if you ever do go to Israel, Tel Aviv has tremendous nightlife. Even you might want to go out late there.
Good to know. If there was any place that would draw me out,
there you go.
Probably the Holy Land.
The Holy Land. There you go. Thanks, Bob. Those are great. So, Bob, let's see. What else do I want to ask you about? I want to talk about your book in a couple of minutes, but before I do that, got 2 more questions for you. Number 1, what's the thing that you're most proud of?
Thing that I'm most proud of, man. That's a tough question. I don't know if I can say I'm the most proud of it, but I know you wanted to get to my book. I'm proud of that accomplishment for sure. And the reason why I'm hesitating is I'm not one who would naturally give himself a lot of credit. I'm usually the opposite. So it's difficult for me to say oh, this is something that I'm really proud of, but it meant a lot to me because it took me 2 years it's a book. It's 51,000 words. And there's a lot of research and reading and thinking and dozens of drafts and all that stuff. And when I finally held it for the first time, I was like, this is nuts. This is nuts. And all that pain, all the sacrifice kind of fades away. You do remember it, but not really. It's fuzzy now. It's like, man, I can't believe that happened. I just showed up day after day after day. And I compiled, 500 word writing sessions for 6 months. And then I edited. And yeah, I know it took me a while to find something, but I am proud of that thing because it just as far as our work with brand builders, we work with, we call it mission driven messengers. There's a mission that our clients are there to serve. That is our mission. And for me personally, as someone who started as a brand builder's client, I fit that mold. Going back to my 5-minute sermon, I want people to know God. I want them to experience God. I want them to really unlock some of the deep inner longings in their heart, things that I believe to be true. And so when that book was finally done, it's been like a doorway to have those kinds of conversations with people, with friends, with family, things like that. I'm sending books for free all over the country. It's just I'm not doing this for money. Here's a book. I'm like Oprah. Everybody gets a book. Here you go. And so when you ask me that question, that's one thing that I'm definitely grateful for For sure. Just seeing a 2-year project come to fruition. It's really fulfilling.
Yeah, man. I'm not surprised by this answer. I talked to quite a few authors on this podcast, and I remember if I said this here, but maybe said to you, like, I hate writing. So not only do I know what it takes to get a book out into the world in terms of working with authors, I love working with authors because they're the ones doing the writing. But the thing, and I was having this conversation with another client of mine who's wants to write a book, and it's not even the creative process of you getting your thoughts and your heart down onto paper, but then the business stuff behind it. It's a lot. Marketing plan and getting onto doing podcasts like this and just getting out there and doing it. And you said something that I laugh about, since we do know each other through brand builders. When I run into a new client who's like, they're like, well, what do you want your business model to be? They're like, I want to be a podcaster and an author. I said, okay, what else do you want to do to make money?
Right.
Like the economics of writing a book, especially if it's your first time author, like it's just what you said. Do it because you care. Do it because it's same with podcasting. Do it because you care. Do it because you know that this is a message that people need to hear. And a book like yours, one person reads that thing and it changes their life. That I'm sure you'll be like, that's all I need. You want it to have an incredible impact. But if one person hears this podcast or one person reads Bob's book, and I'm pointing behind me on an audio podcast, but I am pointing behind me at Bob's book is behind me, is I'm sure you would call that a success.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's funny when you think about the economics of a book. I had been writing for a while and I hadn't even been educated on that world. That was one of the reasons why I ended up signing with Brand Builders as a client. It's like, hey, I have a 51,000 Word document on my laptop. Will you help me turn it into a book? Like do I get an agent? Do I go traditional publisher? Do I do it Amazon Kindle? Like publish it tonight? How does that even work? And once I had finished the actual writing, it was probably, I'm not even kidding, maybe 12 months of planning to release it.
Yeah.
So like what you wouldn't want to do is you end up writing this amazing book. Let's say it's like a memoir, something that just means a ton to your family. But if you actually want to sell it and you want to give it a good chance in the marketplace, and again, it's not to get rich, but like to make the most of it, it'd be a real bummer if you write this amazing book and have just an entry-level minimalistic sales plan to get it out. It's like, you can only publish that once. I mean, I guess you could re-release it, but then all the people that were super excited in 2023, they're not going to be super excited in 2024. We're like, I'm going to run it back. Here's my book again. So just understanding the economics of things. Yeah, you're right. If somebody comes to you and says like, hey, I just want to be an author. I love to write. It's like, cool. What's your day job that's going to put food on the table?
What's your day job?
Because if you go traditional publishing, like, like an entry-level advance, if you're with Penguin or, HarperCollins or something, they might pay you $50,000. That's then taxable and stuff like that. So you're netting $35,000 in 2 checks. And then what? Then you make $1 a book forever if you outsell that advance. If you sell $50,000 worth of inventory, so if you sell, what's that math? 2,000 books, 2,500 books.
Yeah,
most books sell 4 copies. It's like it's nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right in that a podcast, a book, those are great lead drivers. Those are great reputation boosters. But there's very few of us that write 50 Shades of Grey. It just like blows up, and you don't have to work ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I are on the same page with that. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book, since we're already talking about it, as we start to wrap up here, Bob. So talk to us about the book, the inspiration. It's basically, you said it's the Bible told in stories through film, television, and you said through Les Miserables, which I'm very curious about. So talk to us about, I'm always curious with authors. Do you remember when you realized you had to write a book? Because most authors will tell you, like, I realized I needed to write a book. It is an option, but it's like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be happy with myself. Do you remember when that moment was for you, when you were like, oh, I'm going to write a book?
So I don't remember when the moment was, to answer like your direct statement. Oh, I have to write a book. I don't know if I had that moment, because I had been writing a couple books before this one. I had started and finished a couple of children's books. I had started and not finished a couple nonfiction books that are awful, that will never see the light of day. But I never really had that moment where I was like, I have to be an author, until I got to this book. And it's actually the first chapter of the book where, again, the entire premise, well, the title of the book is Our Heart's Desire, How Our Stories Reveal the Thing We Want Most. And that subtitle is really the premise of the book. I believe that the stories that we tell, whether it's movies, novels, Broadway plays, they reveal the deep longings of the human heart. And we usually see the same story over and over again. And for some reason, we don't get bored with it. We don't get tired of it. It's usually you have a hero, you have a villain, there's a love interest, hero, villain, love interest to be saved. You start in paradise. That paradise is quickly undone. Then you spend the next 2 hours trying to restore that paradise. The end. That's the story. Hero, villain, love interest. Paradise at the beginning, paradise at the end, a mess in the middle. And as I was studying, I was writing those bad books that would never see the light of day. I was studying story. So I was studying, how do you create characters? How do you build a world? What is the arc of a story? And there are some stories that don't fit the mold, like a love story is radically different from a horror film or something like that. But that general story, hero, villain, love interest, we see it all the time. So that's how you can see movies like The Hunger Games, The Dark Knight, Saving Private Ryan, The Matrix, Star Wars, Avatar. It's like you see all of these similarities, all these motifs. It's like, oh, there's the hero, there's the villain, there's the love interest. Oh, paradise is gone.
Yep.
End credits. Oh, paradise is back. And so what I say in this first chapter of my book, I was reading a science fiction novel. And again, it was the same story, hero, villain, love interest. And the guy ended up getting the girl. It's like towards the end of the book, 3 pages left or whatever. He wins the girl. And then I was so moved by that moment, which sounds dumb because number one, it's fake. It's, fiction novel, but also I should have known it was coming. Like, of course he wins the girl. You're not gonna, like, the author's not going to have him chasing this girl for 300 pages and not let it happen. And if it doesn't happen, if he doesn't get the girl, that's a book that doesn't sell because the human heart says, no, like that is wrong. He should get the girl. I want him to get the girl. So anyway, he wins the girl. And then that was something that I was so moved by. And what I realized, because again, at that point, I was maybe 3-4 years into reading the Bible cover to cover. So it's just like another pass, another year of reading scripture, like every word. And what I realized is if you zoom out and look at the Bible, that is that exact story. The Bible is hero, villain, love interest. You start in paradise, Adam and Eve, the fall, the snake, the apple, the whole deal. Paradise is undone, paradise lost. There's a mess in the middle. And then Book of Revelation, paradise is restored. Every tear is wiped away. It's like, okay, so that's interesting because if the Bible is true, if what it claims is actually fact, that's going to be the story of human history. Hero, villain, love interest, start in paradise, return to paradise. Maybe that's why we write things like The Matrix. Like you look at Neo, you look at his story. Who is Neo? Well, he's this long-awaited Messiah, right? That's here to set the humans free from a prison that they can't see or taste or touch. Yeah, Neo is the one. Yeah, Jesus is the way.
The one.
So, spoiler alert: if you haven't seen The Matrix, my apologies. You have had 20 years to see it, but
If you had 20 years, exactly.
What does Neo do? He lays down his life to set the humans free. He dies to destroy the Matrix.
Right.
And then the humans live in paradise. That is Jesus.
That's right.
That is interesting. So that's basically the premise of the book. So what I do is I take the reader through the Bible. There's 19 chapters. It's 191 pages. So it's like a quick, I wrote it for the millennial mind. It's like 10-page chapters, quick win, quick win, quick win. But what I do is I lay out that hero, villain, love interest archetype. There's 4 different aspects of that story. You have the cast, like author, hero, everybody that's a part of it. And then just the 3 acts of storytelling. So like act 1, you're setting up the externals. It's the external problem of things. Act 2, the middle of the movie, is the internal struggle. Usually the bad guy disappears, and then it's just the hero and the love interest, or it's the hero and his best friend, kind of like Mr. Frodo and Sam type of journey. Like, you know, they're bickering or whatever.
Yep.
And then in the end, act 3, you have the new world. You have that final battle. Yep. Good either wins or loses, and then it's end credits. And unless they roll out a sequel, you know, some sort of money grab, the mummy returns, the story's over. You have that closure. Yep. And so it was just so interesting to me as a guy who is studying stories, reading the Bible. I zoom out and they're the same thing. It's like, that makes sense. That makes sense. If we have a God who wants to know us and wants us to know him, maybe that's why humans can't get away from that narrative. Because, and I write this in my book, if you look at screenwriters in Hollywood, which is a very secular place, like there's not a ton of Christians in Hollywood. What I write in my book is those screenwriters can write something like The Matrix, and it's not that they're copying the Bible. They don't sit down and say, okay, given that God is the best-selling author of all time, let's just copy his book and put a different name on it. It's like, no, they don't do that. I actually believe that they don't have to. You could never read the Bible and still be drawn to that story because you're a human. If what the Bible says is true, you are a human made in the image of God, a God who wants to know you, a God who wants you to recognize that story because you were born into that story. That's why we don't get tired of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Bob. I want to remind everybody listening, the name of the book is Our Heart's Desire, How Our Stories Reveal the Thing We Want Most. It is available now, Kindle, paperback, and a Audible book as well. Bob, I haven't listened to the Audible book. Is it you on Audible?
Yep.
Because you've probably been told this. Flattery is. I'm going to flatter you as we wrap up here. You have I would listen to your voice.
Amen.
I'm sure you've been told you have a great radio voice, voiceover voice.
It's 5 hours of me. That's a lot. That's a lot to sign up for. But if you're a glutton, glutton for punishment, there you go. Yeah. If you end up buying it, and I know you have the book over your shoulder there. Again, brand voters like having a plan as far as selling the book. Is New York Times best-selling author. In the first couple of pages of the book, there's a QR code. You just scan it. You have the audiobook completely free. So you're able to get both.
Nice.
Yeah. Just BBG planning.
Yeah.
My man. You know how it is.
There it is. BBG. Right. Yeah. Well, Bob, if anybody's listening, they want to connect with you. Generally, LinkedIn's a good place to do that. We'll have all the different stuff, obviously on Amazon. Please go get the book. It's great. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. Really huge congratulations on getting your truth and your vision out into the world. I'm a fellow storyteller. That's why I do this. And so I really appreciate the story arc and the hero's journey and all those things. And I will say this, I finally found a Pixar film that doesn't have a love story. Do you know what it is? A human love story, I should say. Moana.
Okay.
No human love story. I mean, there's a love between the parents, but Moana does not have any sort of love interest. Her interest is not in love. It's in actually leaving. She has a love for her freedom of leaving.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and how do I know this? Because my 2-year-old is obsessed with Moana. So I've seen it a lot.
Totally.
Recently.
And I know we're landing the plane here, but a love interest does not have to be a human female. Like if you think about Braveheart, it's probably 2 love interests, right? You have the human female who is killed, but then the love interest ends up becoming a country. But you just have this general archetype where, hero, villain, there's some love interest, like Katniss Everdeen, female hero, a female protagonist. Who is her love interest? Is probably the Panem, that country that she's trying to restore. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool, Bob. Tradition on the show I have is love of my guests would leave us with short and sweet words of wisdom, something that'll fit on an Instagram post. What do you have for us?
I would say begin with the end of your life in mind.
Love it, Bob. Thank you so much for being on today.
Let's grab some pizza next time you're around.
Next time I see you, Bob, we'll do some pizza and nachos.
Let's do that. Awesome.
Brooklyn Slice. Thanks, Bob. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.